All right, as discussed last time, we'll be looking at starting with Mr. Brooks' witnesses, his professional witnesses. So is there any other preliminary issues before we get started?
No,
Your Honor, thank you.
Sequestration of witnesses, please, Your Honor.
All right, so Mr. Brooks, who will you be calling first?
How long have you been in that capacity?
For the supervisor, it's been a year. I was a visit coach prior to that, so working as a parent educator for 4 years prior to that.
What do you educate parents about?
Parent education, so you're teaching nurturing parenting skills, how to adapt to certain skills if they're struggling with communication skills, nurturing touch, how to be social in society, the appropriate discipline, how to use appropriate praise, or how to use appropriate consequences, not spanking. So using appropriate consequences would be rewards or appropriate time out, and age appropriate consequences in that phrase. How to use independence, empowering independence with children as well, versus doing things for them.
And you've been doing that for 4 years?
5 years altogether.
5 years. What is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's in social work.
All right. Are there any licenses, special state of Michigan licenses?
No.
that you have? All right. I've moved to qualify my client as an expert witness on the issues she's discussed.
No opinion.
Can you tell me a little bit more specifically which areas, psychology, counseling, what particular areas she's?
Well, the areas that I'm particularly interested in from Ms. Irvin is her ability to coach my client in the areas of appropriate responses to stress situations with his child in this thing, because I think there are some questions that have come up with that over time in this matter.
Did you say whether or not you have any professional licensing?
No, I do not.
Your position, Ms. Burke?
I would object, Your Honor.
Mr. Tipton?
I'll also object, Your Honor.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to listen to her testimony as a lay witness, but without any professional licensing, I'm sorry, I would have to decline your request.
Very well. Are you professionally acquainted with my client, Mr. Wells?
I have been I've been filling in as a visit coach for a staff for the last 4 weeks. But I am also the supervisor of the case, the foster care supported visitation case.
So you're familiar with my client?
Yes.
And the issues that you've had to address?
That's correct.
Have you met with Mr. Wells?
Yes.
How many times?
I have met with Mr. Wells 5 times.
Over what period of time?
The case since February. Yes, since February
Of 2023?
2023. Yes.
Have you formed any impressions? What sort of things have you discussed?
We actually have discussed the first time I met with him, he discussed how he discussed that he feels that there's a bias towards workers. He told me that he feels that there's people that do not like him. So he really wanted to build a bond with myself and understanding who he is, I guess. He just wanted to, because it was him and I and Megan met with Therese in her office. It's the first time we met.
Who's Megan?
So we just discussed who he was, what was going on.
Who's Megan?
Megan is the assigned visit coach. Megan's here. She's on medical leave. That's why she's not here.
All right. Continue.
And then since then, I've met with him all of April because Megan is on medical leave. So I'm filling in for her case during the Wednesday visits. So I teach a parent lesson, supervise the visits, and observe the visits, and help apply that lesson during the visit.
Did Mr. Wells explain to you why he feels he is not liked by the caseworkers in this matter?
He had mentioned from his previous childhood, he mentioned there was possible bias because of his criminal background.
How about his behavior during this case?
He had mentioned his behavior, but just briefly.
What did he tell you?
The only thing that I can remember him saying is about him getting loud with someone,
Getting what?
maybe vocally getting aggressive with someone.
All right. So what were your goals in this matter? Or your organization's goals?
We actually have lessons about appropriate communication in the lesson plan. So talking about that and how you appropriately discuss communications and even dealing with stress and managing that. So and those are things, and even teaching Annabelle those things if that was even needed. But those are things that we have in the lesson plan. Dealing with anger as well and managing stress.
From Mr. Wells' perspective, was there stresses situation?
From Mr. Wells' perspective,
Yeah.
that's a possibility. I can't remember. That was back in February when we had that conversation.
I see. So what sort of things have you actually, you say you have programs or lesson plans for them to learn, is that right?
Yes.
How many is he taking?
He has completed 5 out of 16.
And does he appear to be committed to learning what's in there?
Yes, he has.
Have the two of you discussed it?
We have discussed it. Mr. Wells he has addressed that he does have a learning disability. He struggles to actually read the lesson and read things. So we have actually adopted other ways of teaching him, which he's been doing well with. I've read the lesson to him, or I've talked about the lesson during the visit and showed and modeled him ways of how the lesson actually applied. Or when he's applying the lesson without him even knowing that he's applying it, I said, you just applied the lesson. So he's acknowledging that he's doing it as well. So he's contemplating it and he's realizing, oh, okay. And then I'll mention, it's like, okay, so let's try to do something else during the visit that you can apply that lesson.
Now, over the course of time in this case, the DHHS and its purchase of services workers have claimed to the court that my client has significant anger issues. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that has been a claim.
Has it been your experience?
It has not been my experience, no.
What has been your experience?
Since the time that I've met him, he's always been calm and patient throughout the visits.
You ever challenge his viewpoints on things?
No.
You think if you challenged him on his viewpoints, you might get a different reaction?
I
wouldn't
I cannot say that.
speculation.
Response?
I'll withdraw the question. Have you discussed stressful matters with him? Would you like an example?
No, I understand that question. To be honest, we actually we haven't had the situation to actually talk about a stressful matter.
All right. So what you've talked about is how to do it, if I may say it this way, a correct manner of approaching these stressful situations.
Yeah, to be honest, he's been doing quite well during the visits to where we haven't had to redirect or talk about those things. The most stressful thing that we had to discuss was him understanding that his daughter was on vacation yesterday. So that was the only thing, and that was just via text message. So I couldn't understand where his thought patterns were, or if he was aggressive, but he wasn't aggressive on text message or anything with me. So
How did he react to that
he was upset.
unexpected event?
He was upset, but he was okay with the visit being canceled. From what the text messages, it seemed like he was shocked that he just learned about it.
So was
But he still was moving forward with the visit.
yeah, I
And
can
he was still
understand.
moving forward with the visit being
Made up.
made up or canceled.
What else would you like to tell us about Mr. Travis Wells?
From my 4 visits observing with Annabelle, he's patient with her. He helps her redirect and calm down. He helps her with choices. I know Annabelle struggles to eat during the visits. I know, especially when there's so much going on at a library or other things. She wants to go and play like any normal child would. And he is very good with her, with bringing her back or giving her choices. Like, instead of eating the whole plate, how about you eat these 3 oranges and these 2 cheese sticks and finish that? And then we can go and do this. And he's real good with following through. And that's what she needs. And he does follow through. He doesn't give up on that. Even if it takes an hour to finish that dinner, he will do that and get that done before playing. And that's what I've noticed. And he's patient with her. He never raises his voice. And then he'll get up and engage and play with her and play with the kitchen, the dolls, and he's doing those things with her. He's not just sitting and doing those things. And that's what I've observed during the visits. And that's all I could speak for, to be honest. I can't speak of these other things because I don't know of them.
Well, what you're testifying about is what you've seen in his relationships with his daughter,
Yes.
who is how old?
5.
And how does she appear to relate to her dad?
She appears to love him. She's hugging him, saying, I love you, Daddy. I want to go home with you and stay with you. She cries when we have to leave. And it's not just her dad. She says she wants to, this last week, she said, I want to live with my dad for 5 days. I want to live with my mom for 5 days and then just stay the night with grandma for a couple nights. You know, that's how she reacts. Each visit, that's how she is.
So she's
and
told
running
you
up
that
and giving
more
him a
than
hug
once.
throughout the visit.
Excuse me. She's told you that more than once.
Yes.
Because it's liable to come up, I'm going to ask the question, was Mr. Travis Wells given any opportunity to coach her to say that? Or do you think?
No,
it was
because this is what
spontaneous?
she's telling me in the transportation home when Travis is not even around.
I see. I see. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
So when you speak, do you initiate the conversation with Annabella as to where she want to live?
No, I do not.
Okay. And I misunderstood. You said you had 4 or 5 sessions with Mr. Wells.
I have had 4 visits with Mr. Wells,
4 visits. Okay.
but there's been 5 lessons completed, including an initial assessment. But my visit coach, Megan Smith, has completed those other visits.
I see.
She's just on
And-
medical leave right now.
Okay. And so you did the assessment with Mr. Wells?
Oh,
who
Megan
did-
Smith did.
Okay. So when you met, so you spoke about Mr. Wells saying that he felt that foster care workers and specialists had a bias against him, correct?
That is what Travis said.
Right. And how much, if you were to give a percentage, how much time did he spend talking about the grievances that he had with these workers or specialists?
Maybe about 10 minutes, not much.
Okay.
We
And-
were together for about 45 minutes, so
Okay. And did he discuss what his criminal case was or his criminal conviction was to you?
yes, he did.
What did you
Not in
say?
a whole, but he told me he told me that there was theft there was jail time. There was quite a bit. I can't recall all of it, but he had spoke of things. Yes.
Okay. And did he mention particular workers' names when he was discussing?
No, he did not. He did not.
Okay. So you never had the opportunity to actually speak with these workers or specialists to find out from them what happened or didn't happen?
No, and that was not really, I did not want to create a bias either. So I wasn't there to gain an interest in that. It was really to listen to him and be there for him.
When you say, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
Because I wanted to build a trust with Travis.
Okay.
Because he was under an impression, he did not really know if he wanted to begin the foster care supportive visitation program at that time. So our goal was really to listen and be there for him, to know that we were there to be an advocate for him and help him be a coach for the parent education program.
Okay. And when you say you didn't want to create a bias, what do you mean? A bias against him, or what?
And even towards these other workers, that he may have this misunderstanding, or even if that was going on.
Okay.
That's not our role in this place.
I see. So you didn't. So it's not. So if it's not your role, so it's not important to you to talk to. If you brought it up, to talk to any workers or specialists.
It is, but it's also to talk to Travis about maybe dealing with certain situations, such as dealing with his stressors, and maybe dealing more with himself, working with himself, and talking to his counselor about that.
I see. All right. Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
How long are these 4 observations that you had with Father?
I'm sorry?
Are they about an hour apiece, these visits?
They're 2 hours.
So for 8 hours in a supervised, structured setting, you see no issues. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Nothing further.
Ms. Irvin, did you ever observe Mr. Wells at the beginning of our case, which would have been November of 2021, I think?
No, I have not.
And are you aware of his case plan service in this case?
Not all of it.
Okay, have you had a chance to review it?
It was not all of it was given to me.
Okay. What parts were given to you?
That he was in counseling with Therese.
Okay. And what five lessons has he completed?
He has completed the chapter 1, nurturing parenting, chapter 2, nurturing as a lifestyle, chapter 12, empathy, chapter 13, which is the needs of adults and children, and then chapter 17, building self-worth.
Is there a reason why they don't go in order?
They were based on his assessments, and the first 4 are mandatory for all clients.
Okay. And were you able to review any recommendations from his psychological exam?
We don't have access to that, and that's not part of our program.
Okay. Have you covered anything on disciplinary practices?
That not yet, and that I don't have his service agreement in front of us. And again, his service plan is based on his assessments. And it would be his 2 lowest scores. So his 2 lowest scores was empathy. He scored a 4, which was a low average. And then the other lowest score would have been power and independence. So those would be his the lessons that we would have chose more for, not necessarily discipline.
Okay. And do you know why it took Mr. Wells so long to engage in your services?
Well, Mr. Bailey didn't refer the services until February of 2023.
Okay. And he engaged pretty rapidly after that?
Once we were able to open the case, he was on a wait list.
And are you aware that today is a hearing set for guardianship for his daughter?
I am aware of that.
And are you aware that the alternative for Mr. Wells would be termination of his
I am
rights?
aware of that.
And of those two
I object to
options,
the form of that question. The alternative is not termination or guardianship. That isn't accurate.
it is accurate. There was a petition for termination filed before we all agreed to change the goal to
Well,
guardianship.
then let me say it plainly. If you decide not to do a guardianship and you decide to let these people have their child back, there's not going to be a termination. So there's a third alternative in here, which I'm advocating for, by the way.
Yes, I'm aware. How do you want to tackle this, Ms. Berger? Because technically, he's.
I can rephrase. Are you aware that the agency has requested termination on Mr. Wells' rights?
I am aware of that.
And are you aware that guardianship would protect his rights?
I am aware of that.
And is that something that you've discussed with him?
I have not, because I actually just learned of that yesterday.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Any redirect, Mr. Brooks?
No, Your Honor.
Any reason we shouldn't excuse this witness, counselors?
None, Judge.
No, Your
No,
Honor.
Your Honor.
Your Honor, Ms. Langen has been acknowledged as an expert in her field, not only in this case earlier, but in other cases. So I'm just going to dispense with that unless somebody wants to object.
Well, let's get her sworn. Thank you. And tell us about your professional certifications and licensure, please.
I'm a licensed master social worker and have been in practice for over 30 years. I work with youth and families, adults, trauma, substance abuse, and generally with families with adolescents.
For purposes of today's hearing, which area do you think in your licensure and experience would be best to describe the work that you're doing with Mr. Wells?
Well, it's there's some of it is trauma and some of it is skill building.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Trauma work and skill building. Family therapy. The whole family doesn't ever have to be present to be able to build a family relationship. So that is also part of it.
Right. So particularly, Mr. Brooks, which area, how would you describe her expertise that you would like us to recognize?
Well, number one, she is the best social worker I know in this county. I've known her a long, long time. But I think the area of trauma, dealing with family dynamics are two very big issues in this case.
All right, so we'll treat that as a motion to recognize her as an expert in social work, trauma, and family therapy.
Thank you.
All right, objections, Mr. Tipton?
No objection, Your Honor.
Mr. McFarland?
No objection.
Ms. Berger?
None, Your Honor.
Very well. We will recognize her as an expert in trauma and family therapy and social. Questions?
Now, Ms. Langen, first of all, you had to be out of here at 10 o'clock, but you've taken care of that, haven't you?
I changed my appointment. I
So our
pushed it
time-
back a little bit.
All right, so our time frame is now a little more manageable. All right, you've testified in this case involving Mr. Wells before, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Within the last couple of months?
I believe it was in January.
Okay, maybe it was in January. You are aware that the court is considering either A, termination, or B, the creation of a juvenile guardianship. Are you aware of that?
My understanding was that the termination goal was dropped for reunification and guardianship was being considered.
That's kind of the same objection I had about an hour ago. Yeah, that's accurate. Okay.
Your Honor, I would object. Termination was not dropped for unification.
The current goal in this file is juvenile guardianship.
Do you understand what the concept of a juvenile guardianship is?
I have heard about it. I don't know that I understand it completely.
Juvenile guardianship is, if it's granted by this court, is more or less permanent unless something bad happens in the home of the guardian, which presents a serious danger to the
Your Honor, I'm
child.
going to object. I don't see a question here.
I think he's just laying the foundation at this point. Overruled.
Did you hear what I said?
Yes.
Okay, so that is on the table along with termination and reunification. Since you were here in January, have you had any further meetings with Mr. Wells?
Yes, each week, there were 2 weeks that, there's 1 week that I was unavailable. And we have had individual sessions every week, except the week I was unavailable. And we have also had visitation with he and his daughter every week, except for the week I was unavailable and a week that she had been exposed to COVID.
And these meetings last for how long?
Therapy is an hour and the visitation is an hour and a half.
All right. So January, we're now toward the end of April. That's a lot of sessions, isn't it?
Yes.
What can you tell us about those sessions from January till now?
The sessions, are you asking about the therapy sessions or the visitation?
Let's start with the visitation.
The visitation session, the visitations go very well. Are we referring to the child with AW still?
Yes.
Yeah,
AW is always excited to see her dad. She is right away engaging with him. She doesn't always agree with him, but she keeps on like, shall we eat now? And she says, no, I'm not hungry. I want to play first. And he says something to maybe try to convince her, and she might still be saying, no, I don't want to do what you're saying. And then all of a sudden she says, I love you, Daddy. And then keeps on going with her argument about why it should be different. But he is very careful with her. We've been out on a couple of different walks. And he's very cautious about helping her cross the street, holding her hand, crossing driveways when we're on the sidewalk. And she is very careful about asking him, is it okay if I run up to that tree over there? And she listens to what he says. I don't know if there's anything else really to say. He's very appropriate with her. He has a lot of patience. I think these are all things that I said in my report as well.
I think she's 5, right?
She's 5. Mhm. They seem to have a very strong relationship.
And does she at any of those sessions say, well, I've had enough, it's time for me to go back to grandma, or something that would give you that impression,
No,
even if it's a nonverbal cue?
no, she never seems bored with the session. She never seems tired of the session.
Let's talk about the other aspect of your evaluation. Counseling.
Okay. Well, the counseling is going well. Mr. Wells is responding to the counseling. People that see him, that see me, let me know that they see a difference in him. I think that he's thinking things through a little bit differently and being able to regulate his emotions a little bit better. Apparently, from before I was ever involved, his time in court here was different, and that his behavior is more regulated at this point. He's also been able to have enough time to grieve his role as a parent and what he wants for his daughter.
Or where are you not of the department's attitude towards Mr. Wells coming into this case in January, or whenever you got in? When did you get in?
Well, I started work with him in August of 2022, and I think I came to court the first time was maybe October or November. I don't remember
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. But you're aware of what the attitude of the department was in this matter?
I was aware.
I'll place an
I was aware.
objection about the attitude. I don't know, that's such a broad,
I'll
kind of
focus.
specific.
I'll make it more specific.
Thank you.
Are you aware of the department's attitude that he was a physical and emotional threat to everyone around him?
I was aware.
Objection, that's a mischaracterization. I don't believe anyone ever said that he was a threat to everyone around him.
I've lived with this case for years and it's accurate.
So,
Hang on one second.
I guess I would object as leading. I would have no objection. What is your knowledge of this? I think that'd be the more accurate way. So my objection is leading.
I like his idea better. What is your knowledge? I would draw the question.
Thank you. Go ahead.
What is your knowledge of the attitude that you perceived from the department and its purchase of services workers towards my client when you first got it?
my perception from conversations with John Bailey and I'm not even sure if there were reports that I read, but that's possible, that there was a very negative perception that that for no reason at all, that Mr. Wells would be explosive. And my analysis of the situation really is that no one ever really took a look at the big picture of what was going on when there were these different incidents and got his perspective of what upset him during that situation. And I think that being fair to all sides and being able to understand, you know, what makes somebody behave the way that they do. It's clear that Mr. Wells has told everyone, and I've sent Mr. Bailey the IEP that I got from the intermediate school district, that he has learning disabilities. He's told us that. He's explained those things. And so being able to take time to think things through and understand what he's, why he's reacting the way he's reacting. Oftentimes it's because he doesn't feel like he's heard or he's being misunderstood.
What's your impression of Mr. Wells?
If you take the time to listen to him and respect his what he needs, his disability to be able to explain where he's at. I think Mr. Wells is not a dangerous man. In fact, he's very loving to his daughter, and which is of course the most important part of this. He's never been accused of hurting his daughter, and she was not taken out of his home because of his behavior towards her. There was nothing about her care that was in question. And I feel like now we're in this situation where we're talking about his care, the care of her being in question by the parents. And I'm not sure how we can come to that conclusion.
Your understanding from the beginning was it was about other issues, right?
It was about their son who since has died and about his care. And then there was the true story was that their furnace was broken. And within 3 months, my understanding is that they had a new furnace because they got their tax return back and they bought a new furnace, and that issue was cleared up within the first 3 months of the children being out of the home. And that's the only thing in that home in this case that I have seen that would have affected AW.
Now, I think the answer to this question is obvious, but we need to ask it. What effect did the passing of his son have on him?
It brought up a lot of feelings of sadness and grief and anger, and those were things that he never really had the opportunity to work through until we sat down and weekly had conversations and started processing his feelings and how it has affected other things in his life.
Have you had to deal with grief counseling before?
Yes.
Is it quick?
No, it usually takes about a year.
Is he dealing with his feelings of grief, in your opinion?
I think he is. I mean, I think that parents will deal with their feelings of grief for the rest of their life, but I think he's gotten to a place where he's able to accept and keep moving on in a more positive way.
Have you discussed with him the progress of this case with respect to, one, his own progress, and two, the resistance he's getting from the department? If the answer to that is no, looking at seeing the look on your face, what?
Yeah, the answer is yes, but I'm trying to explain, I think, how to explain to you and what you're really looking for. Travis doesn't feel supported by the department. Travis, Mr. Wells wants to be a hands-on parent with his daughter. And he would like that opportunity, and everybody that has seen him with his daughter in the last 8 months, I guess, 9 months, has nothing but positive reports about him.
I mean, you're talking about in the context of your office.
My office, and I've had conversations with the orchards people, visitation specialists. But there are various people in our office that have seen him interact with his daughter as well.
Have you discussed this with any representatives from the department about him? Do they agree with your position?
Are you talking about Mr. Bailey?
Yeah.
And I mean, they're not saying that I'm lying, but I'm not sure that they completely agree. But I don't know that they have the same facts that I do. I am concerned that because of Mr. Wells' childhood and his own experience of abuse from his mom is.
No, I'm going to object. There's no foundation for that.
Response?
She's doing counseling with the man and has for 8 months. I'm asking how he's processing. He has been processing this situation. One of the things I'm sure they talked about is his own history, childhood history, with the woman who is asking to be the juvenile guardian.
Yes, and there is some, we haven't had the admission of the exhibits yet, but there is some indication of some of the materials that were discussed in the exhibits that were proposed for today. I also don't think it's necessarily indicated for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather to share about what's been discussed during therapy and what may be affecting him. So I'm going to allow the testimony.
Thank you, Judge. I would just like that that be classified as Mr. Wells' beliefs or thoughts or what he's expressed, not as factual.
There's no question about the fact that these are statements that were reported by him during his therapy interventions.
And I think I said experience. I'm not going to say I was there to see it, but his experience was of physical and verbal abuse as a child. And I put that in a letter that I believe all the lawyers probably got. And I put that in writing as Mr. Wells spoke to me about his experience. So he also spoke to me about his decision to support his mom being the caretaker of his children when they were first removed. And that had to do with the fact that he thought because his mom was a nurse and his son Michael had serious medical conditions, that he would be best in her care short term, because he was thinking of this as a short term, that this would be a short term situation. Now, as he's thinking about, and we've talked about the court looking at guardianship with his mom for his daughter, his surviving daughter, AW, he is very concerned based on the way he was treated by his mom, his experience of that, and his worries about how she's going to be treated if she stays there long term through that age range. And for him, it was about 8 years old until he left at 17 or something in that area.
What other issues did you discuss with him? Or how was his progress in counseling with you?
His progress has been consistent. It's been steady. It's been consistent. I'm not going to say everything's solved, but that doesn't happen in 9 months.
Counseling doesn't solve things, does it?
Well, you can learn new ways to interact with people, new ways to communicate, and there's levels that come over time. But if you have behaviors that you've or ways that you've dealt with things for a lifetime, it takes time to be able to make the changes necessary. The things that I see in terms of being able to interact with his daughter and be an advocate for her and a parent, I don't see any problems with his interactions and behaviors.
With respect to his daughter.
Well, right, yes.
I mean, that's what we're.
I mean, there's so many other things that he's doing well right now and doing right. He continues to meet with his psychiatrist. He doesn't want to be treated for his mental health. He doesn't want to be on medication. Lots of people have thoughts about that. But he continues to do it because it's in his best interest and probably his family's best interest. He just recently got a promotion at work, which came with a little raise, because the people at work respect how he does his job, and they're showing that by, promoting him.
Your Honor, I'm objecting. She has no firsthand knowledge of this.
I would join in that objection.
I would as well.
No firsthand knowledge of what?
No, the reasons for promotion. There could be many reasons for promotion.
Yeah, he could have bribed the manager. He could have threatened him if they didn't give it to him. That's ridiculous.
So what I do know, though, is that he works more than he used to work. He started the job at part-time and now he's full-time. And I believe that he's telling me that he got a raise, and there must be a reason for that.
Thank you.
Well,
I think that clarifies that these are based on statements that he's made to her in a therapeutic context. So I think it goes not necessarily to admissibility, but to the weight of the testimony. And I can recognize for all of you that I do understand very clearly that these are her speculations at best, but they're also based on her reflections on the statements that he's made from it. So for those reasons, I'll allow it, but recognize that for you in the record. Thank you.
In any event, moving on. You do realize that one of the issues that's being addressed today is the possibility of a juvenile guardianship, right?
Right.
And I have very briefly outlined the ramifications of that status if the judge elects to go that route, right?
That it's a fairly permanent situation. And so I'm going to say that because of Mr. Wells' relationship with his mom at this point, that has never been repaired and has definitely had problems. He doesn't feel like she's going to be able to be fair with him and can let him continue having a relationship with his daughter. And once once it becomes permanent to have a guardianship or semi-permanent, whatever it's called, he won't have the resources to hire a lawyer to go back to court to be able to contest anything if he feels like things aren't, he's not allowed to be a part of his daughter's life, and he's concerned that that will happen.
You are aware that child is not in the state at this point in time?
Yes, I found that out yesterday when he was sitting in my office with whatever you call that, when you make something, you put it in a insulated container, a big bowl of homemade spaghetti for his daughter for the visit. And his dad was 15 minutes late, and I said, your dad's not here yet with Annabelle. And so he called his dad, and his dad said, oh yeah, the visit was canceled. I spoke to Julie last night. Supposedly, Travis was supposed to have known that, because right away I called Mr. Bailey and said, oh my gosh, we're sitting here waiting and Annabelle's not here. And he said that Travis got something in the mail, should have gotten something in the mail that said that this was a change, this happened, this maybe it was an order. Travis said he did get it in the mail, but he did not see a date on there. And I don't know, this room full of lawyers, everybody reads those orders daily. It's not the easiest thing to read through every single thing on there and make sure that you've caught it all. And with a person with a learning disability, and especially with reading being
Your Honor, I'm objecting
primary.
unless she has firsthand knowledge and has viewed this document. If not, it's pure speculation.
Your Honor, it's part of the court record. I asked the court to take judicial notice of it, and it does not have dates on it.
Which
It doesn't
document?
have dates on it?
Which document are we talking about?
Sounds like a letter.
The ex parte order that you signed granting permission for the guardian or the grandmother to take the child to Florida,
This week.
it has no dates on it.
It doesn't?
I'm literally looking at it right now. It does.
Your Honor, that's my objection, is that she's not reviewed or seen that document unless she testified she has. That's speculation.
I didn't say that I saw the document, and I didn't say
You
that.
can't answer the question until I settle the objection.
Sure.
I appreciate your enthusiasm. I do I think that if you did want to voir dire her on this issue, Mr. Brooks, it would be best if you gave her the document to look at.
Sure.
And that way there won't be any confusion about what it says or doesn't say.
It exists.
I can reflect for you that the order was signed March 31st, 2023, and it looks like it was,
Looks like it was April 24th is what I'm looking at.
It's a different ex parte that I thought we had to talk about.
so the one specifically concerning travel was signed and mailed by ordinary mail by the court on May 31st to Mr. Wells, Ms. Harrison, the attorneys by email.
You mean March 31st, Sean?
Yes, thank you, March 31st.
I've had one. It is unsigned and it is dated April 24th of 2023.
I will say, it does not look like, oh, no, here it is. So it was emailed to Ms. Berger, Mr. McFarland, Mr. Brooks, the Public Defender's Office, Mr. Bailey, and another person from Michigan.gov, Ms. Flores, Mr. Tipton, and mailed to both parents.
Well, it's interesting that I should say you take judicial notice. What you're telling me is news to me.
It indicates,
I have one document only.
okay, so it is true that it does not have the dates on it for travel.
Thank you. So the only point I wanted to make.
It does indicate Ms. parenting time should be made up as soon as possible when the child returns, and that placement was to set up virtual contact with the parents while on the trip.
The motion also emails to parties.
Yeah, mine doesn't either. I can't get.
It does say ex parte motion and order for travel. Yes.
Wonderful. Can you also take judicial notice then that the motion specifically states on number 3 that the trip is from April 21st to April 30th?
That's correct.
Thank you.
What's the date of that order?
So the date of the order itself is March 31st, but the motion indicates the dates for travel. So the order does not, but the motion does indicate the travel.
That was an ex parte motion, is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Then I object to taking judicial notice of that in as much as I'm telling you I never got it. I didn't get a copy of the motion, which by definition I wouldn't, as an ex parte motion, and I never got the order. I have one order dated April 24th of this year.
Well, it looks like.
I don't care what their email says.
So the email is mjbrooks43, is that correct or incorrect?
That's correct.
Okay. So it should have been emailed to you on March 31st, but I can't speak to, I don't have any indication in the file that the email was bounced back. It's already been signed. They're in Florida, so I welcome you to entertain any questions you might have around the consequences of that, but it's already.
Yeah, the operative fact the child's in Florida, the operative fact that the order exists is not what I was driving at in this, with this line of questioning, okay? The line of, what the direction of this line of questioning is this. His mother never talked to him about it, never told him she was going. Just one day they're here and the next day they're not here.
Well, I think your client would be the best one to speak to that, unless you want, I mean, you're
That's
welcome to
fine.
ask Ms. Langen about the contents of their conversation to bolster that, I suppose, but,
I'll move on.
okay, thank you.
Has Mr. Wells expressed to you any frustration with his communication with his mother?
He had frustration with his communication with his mother, and he does not talk to his mom. And that's why Mr. Don Wells does the visitation, pick up and drop off, etc.
And I am limiting this only to the duration of time since my client's mother has had a foster parenting capacity with the child. I'm not talking about childhood or birth or any of that
Right.
stuff.
Right. The last time that my understanding is that he had actual contact with his mom was dropping off his daughter at his mom's home, and the situation became heated. He left the home. He went into his truck, and his mom's husband followed him to the truck and was banging on the windows and trying to get him to open the window so that he could keep telling him whatever it was that he was trying to tell him. Mr. Wells explained to me that he left his mother's home because of the things she was talking about that he didn't feel that his daughter should have been hearing. And so he wanted to end the conversation. And so what he did was leave the home, and his mom's husband followed him.
In point of fact, we've gone through this several months ago now. I don't know how many in this very courtroom. Is that right?
We did talk about it before.
In court.
Yes.
Thank you. So from the time the child was placed with her grandmother until now, the communication between the grandmother and Mr. Wells has been described how to you?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I believe Ms. Langen testified that she became engaged with Mr. Wells in August, not since placement began.
Well, he can talk. Fine, I'll do it. Can you answer that question?
I can say that it's broken down. It's become unproductive.
All right.
And he is concerned because of his own experiences of childhood and this experience now with his mom being in charge of his daughter, that he is not going to be able to get the time to interact with his daughter if she is the guardian. And I think that would really be a disservice to the child.
Do you think this case, well, I want to reword this carefully. What is your position with respect to my client having custody of his child at this point?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I believe Ms. Langen is classified as an expert in trauma, social work, and family therapy, not custody or custody evaluation.
I'll rephrase the question, all right? In your opinion, is he capable of taking care of this child on a full-time basis?
Your Honor, I'm objecting, and the reason is, this is the hearing for juvenile guardianship. This is not a hearing for custody of the father.
It's also a hearing on termination of parental rights.
No, this is not a termination of parental rights trial, Your Honor.
So, the question is, do you think that Mr. Wells is capable of taking care of his child on a full-time basis? Is that the
Yes.
question? All right, how do we, in her capacity as social work, trauma, and family therapy, not custody, how can we expect Ms. Langen to be able to answer that question?
I suppose we would need to qualify her on that basis, and that has not been done. I guess that's the answer to your question, Your Honor.
On visitation, I'd be happy to listen to her opinion.
Let me ask you this on the question of visitation. What are the limitations that are currently placed on Mr. Wells on visitation?
He's only allowed to visit with a supervising professional at this point.
Only.
Yeah,
In your opinion, is he ready for more?
yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object again. She's not an expert in the amount of time a child can spend. Or
But my
yeah,
observations.
Oh, hang on, please. She's the visitation supervisor, so I will take into, obviously, she's not been certified as an expert in this particular area, but she has been doing the supervised visits. I do some of them with Mr. Wells.
Your Honor, they can probably make that objection with every stinking question I ask. Do you want me to sit down and go through every single nuance that a counselor does? Because I'll take the rest of the morning doing that to qualify her if that's what these people want. And I can do it.
I'm happy to listen to the answer to this question from Ms. Lang.
I consider the objections
Overruled.
disingenuous. That's a good word, isn't it?
Mr. Brooks, why don't you go ahead and repeat the question for Ms. Lang?
The question is, you've already testified that he gets supervised visitation only.
Right.
Do you think he's entitled to more than just supervised visitation with his daughter?
Yes, I do, because of the time that I observe him with his daughter and the decisions that he makes and the care he takes with her and his patients. He comes to the visits with ideas of things to do. He's very thoughtful in bringing food that is a variety and healthy. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that I can see that he's able to go further with his daughter than just supervised visits.
Based on your observations of the child, does she appear to be receptive in the event he was granted more liberalized visitation?
Your Honor, I think it calls for speculation.
Same answer, disingenuous.
There's no way for her to know what 5-year-old child would think
I
if
asked
her
if-
father would be granted more parenting time.
I
That's like what I
asked
wonder.
if she appeared capable or willing to handle that. I think she can look at the child, come up with an answer to whether or not the child appears to enjoy her visits with her dad.
Yes, overruled. This witness has been qualified in the area of trauma and family therapy and is able to speculate on those points, which I would consider as part of the same question. Go ahead.
She appears to be very receptive to being with him, and that she enjoys her time with him and would like to be able to have time with just him
Okay,
outside of our office.
okay. In very general terms, when you first got this case in August, was it?
Yes,
of 2022.
Yeah.
You were given an outline of the issues you needed to address. Is that fair?
yes.
You have addressed those issues with Mr. Wells. Is that correct?
I have addressed those issues and continue to, but yes.
In August of 2023, in April of 23, do the efforts that you've put into this appear to have become effective? Have they taken with Mr. Wells?
He is definitely making progress. He's definitely making progress and it shows in his interactions with people and behavior.
That's all I have.
So can I just add something?
Is there something else you'd like to say?
Yes, the other thing that I would like to say, and I think I testified about this up here, and this is where I am, I think qualified as an expert, is with adolescents. And I'm thinking about Annabelle growing up in her grandparents' home. And I'm thinking about her knowing that her mom and dad love her and are available. And when she starts to get to the 13, 14-year-old range, I am concerned that her anger will turn on her grandparents because they are the ones that are present for her, angry at them and probably acting out in their behavior, because this is what I've seen over the last 30 years. People that are not allowed to be raised by their parents, when they have them and they have a reasonable relationship with them, that it turns to anger and oftentimes delinquent behavior. And I'd like to prevent that because she's 5 years old now, but we know that her parents are here and they love her. And they have not mistreated her.
And they have not what?
Mistreated her. There's nothing in the records that say she's been mistreated.
Anything else that you'd like?
That's it.
Thank you.
Very much.
Wait, hang on, because there might be
Yeah.
some cross-examination. All right, questions, Mr. Tipton?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Langen. So would you agree that children that are raised by grandparents could still be raised in a loving, nurturing environment and turn out not to engage in delinquent behavior?
Yes, every situation is different. Yeah, absolutely. But what I see that's been set before this child is a very confusing situation because her parents are present and her parents have not hurt her. And so in her mind, that is going to be information that's going to sit with her as she grows up, and it can become very confusing and cause anger.
Right, but the trauma therapy that you provide is not for AW, correct?
Right.
Okay. Well, would you recommend? Okay. Would you recommend any type of family therapy with Mr. Wells and his mother?
I probably would. I had one conversation, I think I testified about that here months ago with his mother, and she said that she wasn't ready or interested in such.
Okay. You mentioned something earlier regarding that no one, I think you specifically said from the department, tried to figure out the reasons behind Mr. Wells' negative behavior, or sometimes negative behaviors.
Right.
I'm just paraphrasing what you said. I know you didn't exactly say it that way, but is that pretty much?
Pretty much.
Okay. So, but would you agree that there's consequences to negative behaviors?
Certainly there would be consequences to negative behavior, but it's just like with the court system, you try to understand all sides of it. And that never happened in those situations.
Okay, let me give you an example. If Mr. Wells tried to run over a foster care worker with his car, would it be reasonable?
Objection. He's asking a question with facts that are definite, not in evidence.
Response?
I believe that it was in several or one report. I don't remember the date, Your Honor, that this actually occurred at a supervised visit at the agency.
No,
and again,
wait.
Sorry. Okay, so we're in a line of questioning, which is asking her to answer to a hypothetical situation, right, Mr. Tipton?
Yes.
All right. So, to what end are we exploring the hypothetical?
That would it be realistic to always try to find out why someone behaves negatively? Is that even realistic? For an adult. So I think that's where I was headed, Your Honor.
All right. I understand your objection, Mr. Brooks, but I'm going to overrule it. It's a hypothetical question. I understand that it does relate in some aspects to one of the things that was discussed at several different points, but this characterization of it as a hypothetical, I think takes us out of that realm, and I'm going to overrule the objection for now.
I think even hypotheticals have to be based on facts and evidence.
So what's the question?
It's overruled. Thank you. Mr. Tipton, could you please repeat your question?
So thank you, Your Honor. So okay, I won't say Mr. Wells. If someone tried to run over someone with their car in a parking lot, would it be even reasonable to try to find out why they would do that?
Yes, because the perception of the one person is that they were trying to be run over, but possibly that had absolutely that was not the intent.
Okay, what if it was the intent?
Again,
Of someone to
facts
run
not
over.
an evidence.
Just this is a hypothetical.
How would you find that out?
Yes, it's a hypothetical question. I'm going to let him cross-examine this witness.
I'll let it go.
Okay, Mr. Tipton, your question again, please.
So what if that was the intent, Ms. Lange?
If after investigation, with
Right.
questioning everybody involved, we find out that that was the intent, then that would be a problem.
Okay.
But what I guess what I was saying is, though, no one ever asked him what was going on that day for you and what were you trying to do?
Your Honor, I
Do you
guess
see what I'm
I'm
saying?
objecting, that's not responsive, we're just asking a hypothetical, now she's getting into actual.
No, she's not.
You're
She's
welcome to
answering the
cross-examine,
question.
Mr. McFarland, unless you have something based in the rules of evidence to object. I would appreciate you waiting until cross-examination if you wish.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tipton, either your same question or a new question, whatever you want to do.
And I'll move on. I'll move on. So Ms. Langen, and you've been providing therapy you've been involved with Mr. Wells for how long? Since he was a teenager?
I met with him at two different occasions in his life when he was a teenager, and then since August of 2022. Yes.
Okay. And your testimony here today regarding Mr. Wells, you're not showing any bias towards him, are you?
I'm not really sure what you mean by that. I mean, I am telling you what I know about him based on the things that I've heard from him and how I've seen him interact.
Well,
So if that's
you
biased-
testified regarding, the department's attitude towards him. Where did you get that information from? Did you talk to anyone from the department?
Mr. Bailey, is
Okay.
that who you mean?
Yes.
Yes, I've talked to Mr. Bailey.
And if you formed an opinion as to whether or not Mr. Bailey or anyone in the department has a negative attitude towards Mr. Wells?
So I formed that opinion because Mr. Bailey is one of multiple foster care workers. He was the last one left, I guess, I don't know. Different foster care workers decided that they were too intimidated by Mr. Wells. They were all women. And so the Fostering Solutions decided to assign Mr. Bailey to, and I mean, this is information that I was given about the situation. And so people were afraid of him. And they gave Mr. Bailey the job of being his foster care worker because of him being a man, and that maybe things would settle down because young women are more intimidated by Mr. Wells, according to the foster care system.
Okay.
The
And
thing is that we've had young women, professionals, interns at Parkside interact with Mr. Wells, and no one's been afraid of him.
Okay.
We've listened to him and gotten his perspective on things to be able to understand if he is upset about something, why that is.
Okay. I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. McFarland, any questions?
I do. Approximately what age, Mr. Wells, when you counseled him as a youth?
He was a teenager, somewhere between 14 and 16.
He revealed back then to you that his mother was maltreating him?
I really don't remember.
Well, I suppose, would it be accurate to say that if you received a report of maltreatment of a youth by an adult, you would have reported it to authorities, correct?
Certainly, but there was a time in there when he went to live with his dad because of problems with his mom. That's what I know. But a lot of times children don't report on their parents because they know they might end up having to go back home with them. And so they don't always tell you exactly.
Well, I didn't ask for an explanation. I just asked if you did, didn't I? True. I just asked you to keep your answers in context with what I'm asking you, not to extrapolate. Mr. Wells has a,
I was just gonna ask you to come to the microphone, but now you've spoken up.
thank you. I will speak up, Your Honor. Thank you. I realize I'm being hidden behind a lot of things here. I'll approach the stand.
Thank you.
Mr. Wells has exhibited aggression against women and that he has a domestic violence conviction against my client, the mother of his child, right?
He has a domestic violence charge against him.
Not
Yeah,
charge, conviction.
he does.
He pled that he assaulted a woman, correct?
I wasn't there, but apparently he pled that.
You're not disputing that, correct?
Okay.
He told me that he told the lawyer that was representing him in district court, he did not hit her, and she said, just plead to it, and it'll be fine.
So he's telling you he lied to the court?
He's telling me his
We're
lawyer told
getting
him
pretty
what
far
to say,
afield
but
here.
I don't know what. You know what, you did tell me that this was till 11, and I changed my 10 o'clock appointment to 11, so I don't have so much time.
All right.
If you need to come back another time, you can let me know.
All right.
I have a problem with that, since I have questions fresh in my mind now. Now's the time to ask him rather than adjourn for yet another time.
We have adjourned until today. Do you have any available time later on today that we could get you by Zoom perhaps, or tomorrow?
And I have about 5 questions total, Your Honor. I anticipate no more than 10 minutes at the most, if that.
I'll be very brief as well.
All right, keep going. No, I have a really busy day today.
All right.
I might be able to fit something in at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Well, can you give us a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. McCrum.
You've testified as a witness for your client before here in court, correct?
Yes.
And you remember, I'm quite sure you do, that after you testified positively for him, he had an outburst outside in the hall in front of myself, Mr. Brooks, and yourself, correct?
I think that might be true. I don't remember for sure, but I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You've not had an opportunity to speak to Mr. Wells' mother to get her point of view, correct?
I did. I called her up one time and we had a phone conversation.
She admit that she maltreated him?
I didn't ask her about that. We weren't talking about that.
And you have no concerns about her maltreating this youngster? That wasn't part of your conversation with her, right?
No, it was a conversation I had with her months ago. Before we even talked about the guardianship possibility.
And is the worker paying for your counseling of Mr. Wells, or is he paying you directly?
He's using his insurance to pay.
Okay. Nothing further.
Ms. Berger?
Thank you. Ms. Langen, I have a list of questions that I would just like you to respond yes or no to, and if I need expansive answers, I will ask for that. Is that okay?
If I
No,
can.
that's not okay. I
I don't know.
object. Yes and no questions tend to be manipulative and lead to inaccurate impressions. If she's got a question, my client should be allowed, or my witness should be allowed to fully answer the question.
You'll have the opportunity for redirects. This is cross-examination. Why don't you go ahead with your questions, Ms. Berger?
Thank you. Ms. Langen, have you reviewed the psychological evaluation recommendations for Mr. Wells?
Yes, I think we talked about that in October. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes. And in that recommendation, there are several things specifically laid out that would benefit Mr. Wells. Is that correct?
I haven't looked at that for a long time, but yes, there probably were recommendations.
Okay. And yes or no, has Mr. Wells done daily journaling through your treatment?
No, he's not a writer. I mean,
And yes or no, has Mr. Wells made a list of triggering events in his life that have led him to this point?
Yes.
And is that a verbal list or a written list?
Verbal.
And has he been able to identify those triggers in everyday life and then use coping skills to avoid outbursts?
I don't know.
And yes or no, has Mr. Wells engaged in role playing, practicing, responding to these triggers with you during your treatment?
You know what, you didn't ask me if I agreed with the recommendations.
That's not my
of the
question.
psychologist. So I haven't incorporated that in my treatment.
So no role play?
I haven't asked him to role play.
Okay. And yes or no, has Mr. Wells engaged in any mindfulness, meditation, or relaxation training through your treatment?
I don't even know what it is.
Probably not.
And yes or no, has Mr. Wells learned the skills? Has he received or is he working on skills to learn specific reactions to criticism and conflicts in his life?
Yes.
And can you explain that, please?
Sure, I will. So last time we were in court, Mr. Wells testified when someone asked him, how are you staying away from conflict? And he said that he's staying away from maybe toxic situations or toxic people. And much of his conflict in the last, however long it's been that his children were in foster care, have been taking place through and around employees of Fostering Solutions. And so when he asked Mr. Bailey for some gas cards, Mr. Bailey said he had them for him and he'd have to come to Fostering Solutions to get them. And Mr. Wells said, I can't come to Fostering Solutions because I don't want a conflict. So he didn't get the gas cards.
And in your treatment with him, specifically related to abuse and neglect, has he been able to identify what those things are and what his role is in avoiding those in the future?
I
sorry, I don't
object to the
understand.
question. He's never been accused of abusing or neglecting this child. It was an environmental issue that got this case, that this court took jurisdiction. Environmental.
Would you like to respond?
Sure, it's listed in the recommendations in the psychological, and I believe that there were allegations of medical neglect for the other child that was brought into care,
Who's the other child?
Michael.
Okay, Mr. Brooks, the psychological is part of our record, so I'm going to allow the question.
I'm sorry.
I can rephrase, yes. As it relates specifically to abuse and neglect, has Mr. Wells been able to identify some things that could be classified as neglect or abuse by the department?
We haven't talked about that because he wasn't, we haven't talked about that.
Okay, and is he able to identify his role in all of these proceedings?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Is he able to identify why we got to where we are?
I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that question because I'm not really sure in the context what that means.
Sure. Has he been able to take an inventory of his own behavior related to these proceedings or how he's reacted to some of the things that have happened?
He's working on his behaviors. That's what I mean, his emotional responses.
Okay. And has he been able to identify a pattern of irrational thinking or triggers as it relates specifically to caseworkers from Fostering Solutions?
Repeat that question again.
Sure. Has he been able to identify any patterns of irrational thinking or triggers as it specifically relates to Fostering Solutions?
No, we haven't talked about that.
And has he been able to identify ways to prevent neglectful situations or abusive situations in the future?
In regard to his daughter, you mean?
Yes.
No, because he hasn't been abusive or neglectful of her.
Okay, have you worked on any sort of disciplinary plans or how he would plan to discipline his daughter if he has more time with her?
We have talked about that, and he is very, he has good ideas.
Okay. And what are those ideas?
Being patient with her, sitting down and listening to her, being really clear in his requests for her to do things or not, and being able to comfort her when she's upset, even if it's because she got told no.
And is there a plan in place for if he says not to do something and she just does it anyways?
Your Honor, I think the council is abusing the privilege this court gave her. Ask a few questions that she could get through quickly. So far, I've heard about 15 vaguely worded issues being raised, none of which are capable of a yes or no answer. And I don't see any sign of it ending anytime soon.
I'm on question 7 of 9.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks, I don't hear an objection grounded in the rules of evidence in the context of your comments. So I'm going to overrule that for now. Go ahead, Ms. Berger.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Lincoln, I believe I asked if AW would just blatantly disregard a direction from Mr. Wells, if there's a plan on how to discipline her after that.
No, we have not discussed that.
And do you know if Mr. Wells is still using cannabis daily?
I do not know.
Okay. And do you know if he has secured income?
He has a secured income. I'd like to go
Yes.
back 3 questions though, and I will say that we talked a lot about, pardon me?
I have no further questions.
She wasn't finished with her answer.
You asked me about how he would respond if she said no. The thing that I know from the conversations that I've had with him is that he would not physically discipline her. He would not be abusive to her. He would not call her names.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right. Unless there's any more questions, I'd like to thank and excuse Ms. Langen. Counselors?
That's fine.
Fine.
No
No
objection.
questions, Your Honor. No objection.
Thank you for your time and your testimony. All right, we need to take a recess on this file.